Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson with you. Half hour from now, Rodney Blevins will join us. He's from Dominion Power. We'll talk to him about some of the power outage. There's also an amazing story about Pepco and BGE and that they can actually charge you even though your power wasn't on.
Wow.
We'll get into that a little bit. And Wilson's got an amazing story that could affect who the next president of the United States is going to be. And it also has Virgil Good, the former congressman, involved
at the very
in it.
center of it, right?
We'll get into that coming up right after traffic and weather. Rachel Holt joins us now, general manager at Uber here in Washington, D.C. Now, what is Uber, you're saying? If you don't know what Uber is a sedan service. What you do, you have a smartphone, you download the app, and you can track where their sedans or limousines, whatever you want to call them, are, and you tell them where you are, and next thing you know, a sedan comes and picks you up.
That's the way it works.
It is a very popular and efficient way of getting around town in D.C. Now, it does cost more than a cab. Now, Uber had the idea of coming up with Uber X Hybrid, which was going to cost a little bit less, and as part of an overall major legislation push on the Taxi Cab Commission, there was an amendment called the Uber Amendment that would force them to set a minimum standard that would be 5 times higher than a standard cab rate in order to placate the cab industry.
It was a protectionist amendment.
It was, and it was pulled at the last second yesterday by D.C. Councilman member, that is Mary Che, and it surprised a lot of people. Rachel, first of all, did I get that right about how the operation at Uber works?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a technology company who's created this app to basically allow users to be connected within a couple minutes to the closest sedan. We work with licensed limousine companies and sedan companies around the city, and you've got a seamless, slick, cashless process.
Now, were you surprised that the amendment was pulled yesterday?
So, we basically had been working and talking to Mary Che at length about this amendment. We were really supportive of everything that was in the amendment, with one major exception, and that was that there was going to be a price floor on the rates that sedans could charge. Ultimately, we think price floors aren't good for the folks who live in D.C. Whether we come out and continue to innovate in this space or other people innovate in this space, when you have a price floor, you're ultimately not gonna get the best possible prices.
Do you feel that you compete with taxis?
Right. I mean, of course, in some ways, we compete with all forms of transportation in D.C. We're a transportation alternative, so we're competing with bike shares and with luxury limousines and with taxis.
Now, the taxis will say, hey, listen, we've got a lot of rules and regulations that we have to follow. Are there any rules and regulations that you have to follow, and is it an unfair advantage that you have over the taxis?
Well, the cars that we work with, the limousines and sedans we work with, are licensed and regulated, just like taxis are licensed and regulated. Now, there are different licensing and regulation rules that pertain to, the black sedans you see roaming around the city all the time. But our cars are licensed. Now, when people ask whether Uber should be licensed, we're a technology company. We aren't a taxi. We're not a limousine. We're a technology company.
So basically, you're the go-between between the people who need a luxury sedan and the people who have the luxury sedans.
Absolutely. So we've created an app and the infrastructure behind that app to allow people to very quickly, very efficiently get connected to the nearest car. And we use tons of data on where demand is going to be. We actually pre-predict demand, feed that information to drivers. We're really trying to bring a different approach to transportation so that we can get pickup times as low as possible and make the process as efficient as possible.
All right.
For folks in D.C.
Now, you were very nice to Mary Che, saying you worked with her to get her to take down the amendment or explain the information to her that she needed and perhaps did not have. But let's be honest about it. This was sort of what we see in the District of Columbia. It was good old boy politics, protectionism. It was designed to protect the cab industry, which, by the way, makes major contributions to people who run for political office in the District of Columbia.
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to go into all the backstory and all the details on that. There was obviously The goal of the minimum fare was to ensure that we don't compete with taxis. That's clear.
All right. Now the Uber X line. So basically, you're working with companies that are already in place, these sedans that have to pass the rules and regulations set forth by the DC government. Now, because these rates are going to be cheaper, does that mean the car is going to be smaller? And how small can these cars get?
So we haven't we haven't defined as a business whether or not we're going to be launching Uber X in DC. In Chicago, we actually work directly with taxis. We're only a couple weeks into launching Uber X in San Francisco and in New York, so we're going to make sure it's the right move for folks here in D.C. But if you look at what we've done in San Francisco, what we've done is we've worked with an all-hybrid fleet. So we've been able to bring what you would consider typical hybrid cars, Priuses, and the like.
Right.
And make those more common as a sedan and as a limousine company, which if you look around, a lot of companies are doing as there's a green push.
Okay. Have you had similar problems with other cities as you expand your business?
The issues we've had in D.C. have been unique.
Okay. It has.
What do you mean by unique?
We've been more. There has been a resistance to our business model since we first, since we first entered DC. Within a month of us launching, we had the taxi commissioner, pretty publicly claiming our model was illegal, without us having ever seen where in the law what we were doing was illegal, and that isn't something that we've seen in other places. When governments have had a question about what we've done, they've come to us directly and asked us about it rather than going after our drivers and impounding a car.
Is it true that they tried to run some kind of sting operation against Uber?
Well, that's what happened way back in January. So in January, the taxi commissioner requested an Uber car and had the car impounded in front of a couple of members of the press back in January.
Have you said you worked with cabbies in other cities. I mean, is it possible that you could do what you're doing now with the sedan industry for the cab drivers as well, similar to what hotels and restaurants do and airlines do with Travelocity and those types of websites?
Sure, that's something that's something that we actually are incredibly open to. We spoke to Mary Chey about that possibility as part of our conversations with her, and whether we decide what's right for our business is to work with taxis here, to launch hybrids, to keep our business model as it is. The issue for us was that, on principle, a price floor isn't the right answer.
Right. Okay. Rachel, it's great to have you on. Thanks very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Rachel Holt, General Manager of Washington, D.C. at Uber, which is a company that is growing. I mean, they're branching out from city to city. It's interesting that it was only D.C. because they're in New York and they're in San Francisco. And San Francisco is certainly a liberal city. I would say the same thing with New York, and didn't have the problems that in those cities that they had.
How about
here in
that?